Story 1. One time my granddad got a sausage roll at a football match during halftime. When he got back to his seat, he found it was overdone. The pastry was quite burned. The man was irate. He didn't take it back straight away as the second half was about to start, but he spent much of the second half angrily lamenting his savory snack letdown. So he takes it home, calls the customer service number on the back. I assume he had a few choice words for the poor soul on the other end, but I wasn't present for this, and keeps the remainder of the sausage roll in the freezer for the next couple of weeks. Skip ahead to the next match day. My granddad tells me we're heading out early so he can have his sausage roll replaced. The customer service line told him to go to kiosk 3 at the front of the ground next to the ticket office. When we arrive, however, the shutters are down at the food place. The old man looks around, growling and turning red in the face, stamps right over to window number 3 of the ticket office, and slams his frozen burned sausage roll down like a gauntlet. At this point, I'm trying to convince him the ticket office was a completely different department from the catering concession, but my granddad was having none of it. The lady working the ticket window continually attempted in vain to convince him the same. They sell match tickets, not hot snacks, but this just got him angrier and angrier. Across comes a colleague behind the glass. Now there's just 2 people to rage at. Then a head steward comes to attempt to defuse the situation, and my granddad begins to wave the burnt sausage roll in this man's face. I was actually surprised he didn't whack him with it. At this point, I'm mortified by the whole affair, wishing I'd have stayed back at the house until nearer kickoff. Eventually, after an hour or so, the shutters come up on the food concession. The fellow at the counter goes, "You must be Mr. Allergens," and calmly resolves the situation, dispatching a freshly baked sausage roll with the steady hands of a surgeon. My granddad is completely satisfied with the result of his hour of insolent rage. As we're walking away, he turns to me and says, "That's how you get these things sorted." Story 2. I was 13 when this happened. My mom had made a reservation at a hotel for a trip, but when she got there, the lady said there was some error with the reservation and that my mom's payment didn't go through. So the lady offered us a double bedroom for a discount. Rather than just taking the room, thanking the lady, and leaving, my mom decided the best course of action would be to scream, in the middle of a hotel lobby, "Nobody is going anywhere until I get my room." She then proceeded to pester the lady, who clearly couldn't do anything about it, until eventually she called the police on my mom for public disturbance. Mortifying. Story 3. Not my parent but grandparent. When I was around 10 years old, my grandmother went out and got us, my brother, and me McDonald's. We got home and we didn't have napkins in the bags. No big deal, right? We have paper towels and napkins in the house, and my brother and I are pretty good at not making any messes while we eat. Nope. Grandmother got us in the car, drove back to McDonald's, demanded a manager, and screeched about how upset she was that we didn't get any napkins. I wanted to just melt into the floor and disappear. It's just napkins, Nanny. Story 4. When I was a young child on a long-distance flight, my mother let my brother and me sleep on the floor. For safety reasons, the flight attendants told my mother that we were not allowed to sleep on the floor. She started to argue with the flight attendants, who then turned to the pilots. The pilots threatened to turn the plane around unless we got up from the floor, but she continued to argue. The pilots announced they were about to turn around because of my mother, so all the passengers got upset. Eventually, she gave in when she had all passengers and flight crew on a Boeing 747 against her. Story 5. Before Value Village, Savers in the United States, I think, changed policies, she would cut tags to get discounts since the cashiers would basically make up whatever price they thought it would be on the spot. If they highballed it, she would get a manager involved, and I hated that. Story 6. I was with my parents on vacation, and the hotel put charges on the bill by accident. My mom marched to the front desk and demanded to see the manager. There was a long line, but she cut right in front of it. The manager wasn't very helpful, probably because she was rude. So my mom went to all the other customers in line and told them that the hotel was a scam and they were ripping us off with fake charges. She made a scene. The hotel called the police, and we were escorted off the premises by actual police officers. I died inside. Story 7. Ugh, my dad. He can be such a difficult person if you get his order wrong. whether it's fast food or a nice sit-down restaurant. He often yells at waitstaff if they undercook his steak. It has to be well done, or he claims to have lost his appetite. One time, we went to Burger King when I was younger and sat down to eat. He took one bite of his burger, spit it out, and immediately started complaining about it being undercooked. He cut in front of everyone in line to yell at the cashier. Then he asked who was the cook. When the cook appeared, he threw his burger, hitting the poor kid directly in the face. He's now banned for life from Burger King. Story 8. My mom demanded to see a cafe's hygiene certificate when she saw an employee go from cutting cake in the kitchen to handling money at the till, even though the real problem is going the other way. Story 9. My mom asked me to call her a taxi via an app. She ended up calling me multiple times, complaining about how the driver didn't use the route she thought was best. She never owned a car and doesn't know how to drive, even though the driver just used the best possible route the navigator suggested. She ended up getting out halfway and using the subway. The driver proceeded to call me in tears, completely shocked, unsure of what he did wrong, and apologizing. I felt terrible. I never called her a taxi again. Story 10. I grew up in a smaller town right on the cusp of its big growth boom. We knew our town had finally made it when we got an Olive Garden. We used to eat there 2 to 3 times a month. My mom and I would always split an entree and my dad would get his own. We knew the rule. If you're splitting an entree and you get more than one of the family-style bowls of salad, then you'll be charged an extra $4 for the extra person, which is fair. 2 entrees come with 2 unlimited salads. Well, one day my dad decided he wanted more salad. Only he wanted the additional salad, but the waitress said if she refills the bowl, we will be charged the extra $4. Well, lo and behold, my parents threw the biggest tantrum because only he wanted the additional salad. They demanded to speak to a manager, and the manager explained the rule, which we knew, but offered to compensate the extra salad just to get my parents to stop yelling, and they did. When our bill came, the manager compensated my dad's entree and the additional salad fee. Well, my mom got up, interrupted the manager while he was talking to other guests, and threw the check in his face and asked, "What's this?" She was furious that he compensated my dad's meal. He ate the meal, therefore we would like to pay for it. She wouldn't stop raising her voice until she was allowed to pay for the meal, but not the salad. The manager was confused but obliged. When they brought the change, the manager slipped a few free appetizer coupons. My mom ripped them up and threw them on the ground as she left. Safe to say, I didn't eat out with them for at least a month, and I still refused to go to Olive Garden with them. Story 11. I worked at Best Buy. I stopped in with my mom one day because she wanted to buy me the Star Wars DVD box set for my birthday. I had a huge crush on the girl that was working the customer service counter. Well, the DVD set rang up $10 more than it was priced, and my mom deliberately didn't say anything until after the transaction, so she could claim the $5 Michigan Scan Law bounty. My crush didn't know how to process it and the manager was busy, so my mom tore into her about how it was her job and how she should understand how to do things. At my job, to a girl I liked. My life was misery for a while afterward. Rest in peace, my inbox. No, I never got the courage up to ask her out, and she left the store afterward. Story 12. My dad just loved to argue, and he loved a deal. We were shopping in a department store, and I found a pair of pants I was mildly interested in. The pants were tagged at $40, and the sign on the rack was all pants $25. I was mildly interested. I asked the sales clerk if they had them in my size. The clerk said, "Those aren't supposed to be on that rack." My dad was upset and insisted on getting the pants for $25 and started asking for a courtesy discount on top of that. The situation escalated to the floor manager and the store manager. Meanwhile, I didn't want the pants. They were okay pants, I guess nothing awesome. I just didn't care very much about them. I was more than happy to move on. I told my dad I didn't want the pants, but by then he didn't care about what I wanted. He wanted the pants at the better price. Eventually, after about an hour of arguing, the store manager said, "We're not giving you the pants at that price. Take them or leave them at $40. So we left them, which suited me just fine because I didn't want the pants. Story 13. Not me, but my brother's wife. Her stepfather and mother took the family out to eat at a Red Lobster. They get there and it is super busy. So the stepfather walks up to the host and says, "Yes, we have a reservation. The problem is, Red Lobster, or at least that one, does not take reservations." The host explains this and says it is going to be a 20-minute wait for seating. Her stepfather flipped out and started screaming that he had called 3 hours beforehand and made a reservation. The host politely told him this was not possible as they do not take reservations. He continues to scream at the host and says he wants to talk to a manager. The manager comes out and tells him the same thing. They do not take reservations, so it is not possible that he had made one. He continues to cause a scene, and people started leaving just to get away from this toxic guy. Finally, the manager says, "Fine, we will put you ahead of everyone else that has been patiently waiting their turn." He says, "Thank you." They get seated. Once they get to the table and the waitress walks away, he slyly winks and says to my brother and the rest of the family, "That is how you get things done. I wasn't going to wait 20 minutes. My brother refused to eat or order for fear of getting food that had been spit on." Story 14. The grocery store had a sign that said if an item rang up higher than the advertised price, it was free. It was the 1980s, and stores did things like this that I never see today. My mom was buying a box of Little Debbie cakes, and they rang up for $2.85 instead of the advertised $2.50. Now, my mom wanted her free cakes. The cashier didn't know what to do and called a manager. The manager told her to complete the sale, and he'd be right back. He returned cheerfully, handed my mother 35 cents, and said, "There you go." My mother pointed out the sign behind him, and he said, "Oh, the last manager put that up. It doesn't make any sense. I'm the new manager, and I just haven't had the sign removed yet." It was a printed plastic sign that was screwed into the wall. My mom insisted they honor their sign, but he refused. At this point, looking back as an adult, I totally support my mom's actions. She gathered her things, decided against taking the Little Debbies on principle, and we got in the car. She drove downtown to the main store of this small chain, knowing the office was next door. We walked into a perfectly 80s wood-paneled office where my mother asked the secretary to speak to the owner of the store and was allowed to do so since this was a family-owned business. Their corporate office was smaller than the row of cubicles my staff occupy at work. There, my mother unleashed a tirade about how she had lost faith in his brand and how his word was meaningless since they would not honor the sign. The owner stood up, profusely apologized, validated her anger, and then pulled out his wallet, handing her a $5 bill along with a promise that he would speak to the manager and the sign would either be honored or removed. We got home and found that the ice cream we bought had melted in the trunk because of the summer heat, ruining the cereal and the bread. Story 15. I might be late, but my dad once asked the guy at the Verizon wireless store to give him his own social security number because he asked for my dad's. My dad walked out afterward with some stranger's social security number on a post-it. I was a silent bystander because I really wanted my first phone. Story 16. My father consistently returns food to grocery stores when he is unsatisfied with the quality. The worst is when he returns the 2-pound bricks of cheddar cheese because they went moldy before they should have. Story 17. My mother-in-law is truly difficult. Going out to eat with her is always a nightmare. Her orders have 14 special requests, but she's not at all kind about it. She is defensive from the start, acting as if you're an idiot who's already messed up the order. No dressing, not on the side, nothing, completely dry. Do you understand? I will send it back. The one I will never forget was dinner at Joe's Crab Shack. In case you've never been, it's one of those places that every so often plays a song that the entire staff is required to drop everything and do a little synchronized dance to. It's quick, everyone gets a little kick out of it, and it's part of the fun. Now, my mother-in-law knew this. It's not like she'd never been here, but apparently, she was not willing to wait 2 extra minutes for her dry salad. So she started getting upset as soon as the dancing started. She called for a manager, who clearly knew her well and offered a quick apology for doing their job, a discount, and her dry salad. But she was not completely satisfied. She told us that even though dinner for our party of 8 was on her, she was not tipping the waitress 1 penny. She continued to complain loudly for the rest of the meal and antagonized our waitress over petty issues. I worked many years in customer service, and as a decent human being, I made sure to get my bill separate so I could tip for the entire table. I wrote a quick note on the receipt, something along the lines of, "Way to stay positive, even when the customer is difficult." I was a little afraid of her response, as it was one of my first interactions with her too, but when the waitress came and hugged me, we locked eyes. She knew. I didn't care. "Don't be rude.